So why don't we just dive right in? I'll start. I'll set the premise for the discussion. So 2014, out of nowhere, there seemed to be this huge primordial explosion of crypto with starting off with Ethereum. 2014, Vitalik Buterin, this Russian Canadian hacker, uh, from studying and researching Bitcoin, he builds his own virtual machine, the EVM. And what this allows is this new token standard, the ERC-20 contract, to become available to almost anyone across the globe, now allowing them to launch ICOs. From the ERC-20 contract, we see this evolution to non-fungible tokens in the ERC-721. With this, we now have a premise for non-fungible tokens and games like CryptoKitties to emerge. Next step, Wojciech Radomski, the lead engineer at Engine, develops the ERC-1155, which, and if I'm getting this correct, allows in-game assets to be moved across different wallets with zero gas fees. So do you think, is that the real innovation in this 1155? The fact that it can pretty much move game assets with zero gas fee, or is there something else there?
Who's the question aimed at?
Either of you, whoever wants to take it up.
And Patrick, you're probably going to have more insight into the functionality of the ERC-1155 protocol and the dynamics around it. So, I'll have, if you could take the lead on those types of questions, great.
I question the timeline of events personally, because I don't think ERC-20 naturally falls from Ethereum, or that people thought, or that Ethereum. Say, I'll rephrase it. Was Ethereum built as an ERC-20 token machine initially? Was that the purpose of it? Because I don't think that was the purpose of it. The purpose of it was to build a Turing complete, decentralized computer that acted like a proof of work blockchain. So, and that's the vision I had in my mind when I started looking at Ethereum. But then I think that the cheapest, easiest thing to make money to begin with was writing these ERC-20 token contracts. And I met some of the worst, scandalously scummy people ever you'd imagine. Just making an ERC-20 contract, building it some kind of story around it, and making a load of money from it.
I believe it.
Banbex, they were a great example. They got taken to court over this kinds of thing, but sort of 99.9% of the ICO projects were this. So if we're saying the first use case of Ethereum was scamming people.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
What was the intention of building Ethereum to begin with? Scamming people? No. So we learned a lesson, and then CryptoKitties came around at a similar time. Did all right. Did it do anything game changing? Did it do anything that Bitcoin couldn't have done if it really, really wanted to? So it's just to say that Ethereum was built because Bitcoin started to be getting built out as a penknife solution. But now we find that Ethereum is a penknife solution because the protocols being run on it converge on very specific kinds of things, like tokens, So it's not really fulfilling its Turing complete potential, shall we say. And that, with that being said, yes, ERC-20 continues to ERC-721, continues to ERC-1155, but it's not like it continues that way because it's logical and the powers that be or someone really smart said it should be that way. It's because we're getting from a 0.1% success rate to more like a 3 or 4% success rate. That's how I view it as an engineer.
So what do you think distinguishes, say, the top 1% of ICOs on Ethereum from the bottom 99 that are essentially garbage? Like, what makes the 1% of ICOs special? Is it the teams? Is it new fundamental architectures?
No, not necessarily. It's a mixture of things. Because Engine, they did an ERC-20 token, and it worked. And the one thing they did well that no one else did, you see, so Engine had a pre-existing customer base they could market to. They knew what that customer base was, and they knew what incremental product they needed to build upon their existing product offering to give the blockchain the 10x value add proposition without over-promising. And then built out a clearly defined suite of products, like McDonald's has a clearly defined suite of products. McDonald's doesn't say we're going to change the world. McDonald's says we're going to sell you a hamburger for 99 cents.
Right.
And then there's a whole culture and tradition and a marketing and a competence and training that's then fed in to McDonald's product that makes it a value add. So the ERC, and you can have any sort of mixture of these. So like Bulgari sells perfume, and it's sort of like ethereal, literally. It hangs in the air. The value of perfume that hangs in the air, and you pay loads of money for it. Doesn't really have tangible value. We all know we like women that smell good, and they charge like $100 for it. But it costs them $1 to make, but it's still a product, and we want it. And there's some tokens that are at that end of the spectrum, and I just think something like Engine is kind of, what would I say, like Macy's end of the spectrum. You know, like high-end, but good, solid product, trustworthy. But there's a lot of people, they didn't have enough of each ingredient, and the market didn't know what to look for. It was a very immature kind of investor investing in these kinds of things for various reasons. I don't blame them for it necessarily. And the mix just wasn't good. It just showed why regulation was built to start with, even if regulation doesn't work well today, you know. So that's my opinion.
So let me get this right. Your main argument is that Engine is built on the right fundamentals, but the question is whether it will draw the right attraction. Is that somewhat there?
I'm saying Engine built a 10x value proposition in a defined way that drew punters and gave them a market price. I mean, the market value of Engine, it's $100 million, so it's substantial, but it's not like they've changed the world. They haven't set the world on fire. All they've done is made a coin that held its value somewhat. But the gross domestic product of Fiji is probably bigger than Engine's full market caps. So, you know, we're not in the scheme of things, it's not that substantial. It's just the same as any other business that ships product and has a big value. You know, and we shouldn't get carried away with the significance of it. You know, that is what I'm saying. Like ERC-1155 is a product that has been shown to have some potential, but I think the conversation is much better had in terms of trying to dive into what that actual potential is? Like, have they found everything there is to find in that conceptual phase space, or is there still more to look for? And I think if we all believe that blockchain is going to be $1 trillion kind of a thing, that I think they've kind of hacked off a bit of rock in the Welsh mountains and found a bit of gold, and there's actually a big vein extending somewhere actually quite far away from ERC-1155. But it's a good place to start examining geologically, or to use the analogy, seeing as I live in Wales, we'll use a mining analogy.
Yeah.
So I think the gaming industry as a whole is a tremendous opportunity. It's big now, but given the what blockchain and innovation has to offer, there's going to be significantly more opportunity. But from what I gathered with previous conversations with Patrick, Engine Coin, they've only just kind of scratched the surface, and they haven't actually lived up to the potential that's there. So in a sense, so this ERC-1155 protocol, it goes a long way towards kind of getting the ball rolling, but it stopped short of realizing the full potential for the gaming industry. So perhaps it's going to be, instead of 1155 protocol, it's going to be 1156. The improvements on the next protocol, we're going to get a little bit closer to where we can be, and who's going to do that may not necessarily be Engine Coin. There's other players in the space, and new players coming into existence, such as Rchain. So the chapter isn't written just yet on what's going to happen.
All right, so I think we all agree, we're on the same page, that there's an untapped potential here, and it's still yet to see who the clear frontrunner is going to be. But what I want to know is what actually differentiates an 1155 contract from, say, a typical CryptoKitty contract where you could store the DNA of a cat and breed 2 different cats. Because from what I've read, there's an article that talks about the gas fees of the 1155, and they mention that when you trade video game assets between games, when utilizing the 1155, you actually don't pay a gas fee. Is that correct? Because that's something I've read, but I still haven't confirmed it at all.
No, that's untrue. You do pay gas fees. You always have to pay gas.
All right, so that was one of the questions picking at the back of my brain, but
there might be, because one of the there's numerous problems with ERC-1155, and I'm caught between two minds. I'm like a big picture thinker, and I'm trying to go the whole way, and I really respect people who've productized early and made it work, because it helps everyone, and I think we run a risk of scapegoating those who broke through the wall for not doing it properly, and so I don't mean to sound too harsh, but Engine's product, you need to go through a centralized server to access the blockchain via Engine's products. So if anything's being advertised as not having gas fees, it's probably taking place on their centralized servers anyway.
Yeah.
So if it's true, it's not on the blockchain, so it defeats the purpose of it. So I'd almost be worried if it was true. And there's a lot of things you can do with it. So like ERC-721, you store some metadata in a token, you breed it with another token that has some metadata, and then each of their metadatas go through some kind of algorithm to produce a new token, and that's sort of called breeding. And that's about as much as you can do with games on the Ethereum blockchain, because it's very limited the amount of metadata you can store. So with Engine's product, the metadata is a serial number, and Engine's centralized servers map the serial numbers of the tokens to URLs, which store JSON data to the actual metadata. So you're not decentralizing the storage of the actual data of the game items, like the 3D models, the stats of what the wizard that you've leveled up to level 150. Like, none of that is on the blockchain. The only thing that's on the blockchain with the Engine's product is your receipt for that game item, which is actually stored back at Square Enix or any one of the other major game companies, you know. Yeah. So that's the downside of it, is that literally that's all Engine can actually do on the blockchain, and any promises on top of that don't happen on the blockchain. So when Engine starts to talk about this idea of the multiverse, which they tried to make me do, it's literally not possible with the technology they have today. So there's a dissonance there, and I think it leads to a lot of analysts with this misunderstanding of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a common factor that I'm seeing again and again as I get more in depth into crypto. While all these systems market themselves as decentralized, it seems as time goes forward, larger and larger groups form centralized communities around these systems. And then once again, it ends up going back to some sort of centralized server. Even, this may not be the perfect example, but even Bitcoin, when you have large whale miners like Bitmain mining at nearly 30% of the pool, they have an enormous amount of control over how that system upgrades and forks itself. So I think that's a really great point, Patrick.
Yeah, well, I think this is why the 2.0 solutions with the proof of stake will be interesting, because you'll be able to do more on chain. I think probably most of the problem of proof of work is that the real estate to be able to do computation on the chain is very small, and it ends up becoming like Hong Kong real estate very quickly, and just sort of massively overpriced, and you're limited with what you can do, and then because there's that diminishing monopolizable resource that people are fighting over, you end up even on the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitmain becoming a cartel, and again in the Ethereum blockchain, you also see these cartel-like products popping up around it, not just in terms of Engine sort of semi-centralized products, but also everything else to do with Ethereum seems to be semi-centralized, like the platforms, the testing platforms, the Bancor exchange. So yeah, it's still struggling to achieve the full vision.
Yeah, and steering this back into the gaming industry, and maybe Steve, if you want to pick up this question, what steps do you think Engine would have to take to have real impact on the gaming industry? Would they have to partner with a game like Minecraft? Would they have to implement their technology into Unreal Engine or Ubisoft? Like, what steps would they really have to take to actually unleash their potential?
And I think that's actually, again, a question for Patrick. He's had more interactions with
Steve,
Engine.
I don't steal your thunder.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if we get to the Rchain part of the conversation, I can certainly add more content.
Okay,
but,
I love the voice. I can just keep speaking all the time, but please, if I am just speaking too much, just say.
No, yeah, it's I'm learning as well on these points when it comes to I'm new, to the gaming industry, so this is good for me as well. So feel free to.
Because I have strong views on this subject. I think one part where Engine missed a trick in their business strategy and why we kind of fell out was because I thought blockchain would be perfect for enabling open source game engines. So right now, you're right. In gaming, you kind of have an game engine monopoly between Unreal Engine and Unity. And they're kind of corporatized entities, and they take a percentage of the profits. They charge you. They kind of take a cut of their asset store. So they're making big money, especially as Unity is moving more and more into simulation and engineering, where the big money is. They're making really good money. The problem is the gaming industry is very vicious. I think they're turning, even the AAA titles right now are dreadful, and it's actually pushing a lot of the talented developers with the creative mind into the open source community. And they're actually holding their weight and putting up a fight with next to no resources whatsoever. And I was really interested in Engine do sponsor a game engine called Go.Engine. And the more I looked into it, the more I liked it. The more it looked like it was built by proper engineers from the ground up as a way to overcome the clunkiness and difficulties of working with the tools they're used to. So it was really a sword-making machine built by master blacksmiths, but still and worked very well, but still they're doing it with few resources. And if Engine Coin could have been used more to fund the Godot community as a way to help them monetize and level the playing field with Unity, I think that would have been a much better use case, purely from a business perspective and value maximization perspective, than punting this kind of multiverse meme, which they can't achieve. So I think even Engine Coin could have done something radical to change monetize the way game development is monetized today. What was the other question?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And
okay.
I've actually played around with Go.Engine before, and that would definitely be a great launching point.
And my CTO for the puzzle game I'm making called Cube Spawn Maker, I was one of the founders of Go.Engine as well.
Oh wow!
It's kind of well in with the community. Understands Go.Engine from the source code, helped write the source code. So I think we're really well positioned to achieve this vision of integrating game development and blockchain at a deeper level than Engine have tried to do.
All right. And then, so how would you guys say the collab and maybe even Rchain, to a certain extent, views the gaming industry? Are they thinking this as like a first-hand approach, or are they looking at financial transactions and blockchain wallets first? Like, what's their approach to games within blockchain architecture?
Well, the goal of Rchain is to maximize transaction volume, because that's going to prove the promise of Rchain, which is ultimately, Rchain's goal is to be the next generation blockchain platform. In order to prove that, you need dApps running on the platform, producing transactions. So when you think of all the industries that are out there, certainly some are going to be ideal for blockchain, others not. And some industries are going to be more mission critical and others not so much. So the advantage of the gaming industry is that there's potential for high transaction volume because there's thousands upon thousands of gamers, but it's not necessarily a mission critical industry. If you've got your sword and you're trying to go from one game in the multiverse to another game, and something happens and it doesn't, the sword or asset doesn't go to the new game successfully. Nobody dies, no one gets injured. It's not catastrophic. It's not mission critical. So that is appealing to a blockchain platform which is trying to create transaction volume. So you have the gaming industry. You have music, and music streaming would be another industry where you have the potential for high transaction volume, but it's not necessarily mission critical. If you go to download a song or stream a song and something happens and it doesn't come through, it's going to be okay. So that's the appeal of the gaming industry, and Patrick has sort of introduced me to this world. So I've been kind of helping to trumpet the potential among the collab. And the collab, the way it's organized, or I should sort of back up, for the listeners. So Rchain is Rchain Co-op is a cooperative. So it's anyone is available, can join the Rchain Co-op and become a member. But you don't necessarily have to be a co-op member to benefits from the Rchain platform. So there is a broader community. And the collab is a group of individuals who are blockchain enthusiasts, who many are members of the Rchain cooperative, but you don't necessarily have to be one. And there are collab members who aren't members of the Rchain co-op. So, but the collab is once again, individuals who are working together, learning about blockchain and what its potential is, and now we're working towards developing applications, and it will, it slowly it's taken shape, and the gaming industry is another industry that we're looking at to help add to the effort to build up transaction volume.
All right, I love it. Very well said, Steve.
Yeah.
And then maybe sidestepping from the talking about gaming so much, you also mentioned the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I've read, Rchain has also, they spent a lot of time with, I don't know if they officially acquired it or not, but they spent a lot of time attempting to partner with Immersion Networks. Is that something that you see that's going to help them make like a special impact in the music industry, or like what involvement is going on there?
Right. So the history to that was, in the early days when the Rchain platform was being built out, at that time, they kind of identified what the architecture should be. And then, the developers, rolled up their sleeves and started to build it. But when you're building something new and innovative and massive, you don't know how long it's going to take to build it. And that was the shortcoming of Rchain early on. So, you do your best to predict the timeline of how long it's going to take. Well, Rchain, in all its wisdom, those that were managing the effort, they were ambitious. They overestimated the time that it would take to build out the platform. In the end, it took much longer to build than it did. So back in 2017, with the timeline, the shorter timeline that they anticipated, they started to look at what would the challenges be once the platform was built, and the challenge would be transaction volume. So we're there at that point now. This is 2020, May of 2020. So Rchain has achieved mainnet, and they're working on developing dApps. But in the summer of 2017, when you're trying to line everything up as far as when things would happen, it wasn't anticipated, hey, come May of 2020, we should be ready to go. It was maybe 2018, the end of 2018. So in 2017, they started identifying what could they do to sort of grease the wheel, so to speak, to encourage dApp development. So there was a whole series of different efforts, independent projects that were funded in different ways. And then another one was under the Rchain umbrella was RSong. So it's the letter R, then the word song, RSong. And so it was under that same intuition that I mentioned earlier, that it was streaming and downloading of music was high volume, but not mission critical. So that resonated in 2017, just as it does today in 2020. So in 2017, the thought was, okay, well, how can we move that effort along? Well, in order to encourage people to download or stream music from the blockchain, perhaps it would be great if they could have an exceptional listening experience, something that was unique that they hadn't heard before. So that was the motivation for licensing this immersion protocol, and I'm not sure if it's a protocol, but this immersion deck, I believe they refer to it. So this immersion deck would create this 3D sound experience that people have never heard of before. You would need headphones or headsets in order to realize this 3D sound, but it was going to be that added value that was going to motivate people to use RSong to download and stream audio. Well, as the sequence of events went along, building out the Rchain platform took longer than what had anticipated. And the immersion deck was licensing. So, there was, fees and payments associated with that. So here you have a situation where the Rchain platform isn't built yet, so there's nothing you can't download any music, but you're making payments for a deck that's not being used. And then on top of that, you have this blockchain bubble where, at the end of 2017, Bitcoin reaches an all-time high, and then shortly after that, a month or two, all the altcoins reach all-time highs. But then it's a race to the bottom, and all blockchain platforms were caught up in that. So these decisions that were made in the summer of July 2017, going into the end of 2017, where you have capital at your disposal, going over the next 2 years, the time frame for development gets extended, so you're spending money on developers and so forth, and the market is crashing. It's moving into a crypto winter. So capital dries up, and it's made the circumstances challenging for not only Rchain but many blockchain platforms in whole. So that's sort of the backstory to the immersion deck saga that happened, but the sentiment is still the same, and it's how do we get in transaction volume, building dApps that are non-mission critical, and hey, music streaming downloads is still a great pathway. And our song is still around. Rchain, once we get through some performance enhancements to help realize the performance that is the promise of Rchain, the next is these digital assets. So a song is, in a sense, a digital asset that you're going to download or you're going to stream. So our song will get updated, and out of our song came a new product called the Rchain Asset Tracker, or more commonly referred to as RCAT. And RCAT is more towards supply chain management and shipping. So in the commercial industry, where you have a cargo container that's in Singapore, and it's filled with items and components from different vendors and manufacturers inside that cargo container, not only is the cargo an asset, but what's inside the cargo container are assets. So everything has to be tracked, and it can be tracked immutably on the blockchain as it travels around the world from Singapore to New York City or to Jacksonville, Florida. So there's great promise in tracking of assets. Now, given logistics,
see, it's something like at some level, like everyone wants to take a bite out of Greg Meredith, and I totally empathize with this more than anyone. Okay. But actually, in the case of our song, I have to hold my hands up and appreciate the purity of his vision and actually the synergy that has fallen out of him sticking to his guns with a kind of a pure mind about how it should work. Because actually, if you look at the market, most of the kind of SoundCloud stuff that you're looking to monetize for our song is lo-fi, low-budget, hip-hop type, goofy, gimmicky in the extreme to maybe go semi-viral. So it doesn't actually need the immersive software stuff is a way to encourage all the music artists to make music like Motown did in the 1950s. Okay, but literally nobody's doing that anymore. So actually, from a commercial sense, it kind of made no sense. And that's what I thought at the time. But in terms of having this mission non-critical tech that follows a pure vision, and actually according to the taste and what human beings are capable of, we should be making much better music today in terms of what we have. So, and for RCAT to then have fallen out of that, where you have a database that can query engineering 3D models based on not metadata, but the features of those 3D models. Boeing doesn't have that today. Okay. Airbus doesn't have that today. Okay. I'm going to have it sooner than these big companies because of Greg's irrationality, you kind of have to call it. And RCAT opens the door to all this Industry 4.0 Internet of Things TED Talk stuff that was sort of previously impossible. So we're actually getting closer, and then we're not talking about it as $20 million spent for a product that doesn't exist, but actually $20 million spent to open up the market, open up trillion-dollar markets, open up big ticket stuff, infrastructure, energy, insurance, banking. So, that you should think now of Rchain as being, sorry, there's knocking going on in the background. I don't know where it's coming from. Okay, sorry about that if we're recording. But anyway, we should think about Rchain being ready to fulfill the mission that Vitalik Buterin gave the blockchain back in 2014. because to do that kind of stuff that was promised originally, you need something like RCAT. So the way I see it is, as a business venture, our song wasn't right, but in terms of unlocking the doors necessary to tackle the big markets that really get me up in the morning, great. And I have to hand it to Greg.
All right, so RCAT I've looked into, and I believe that's definitely a game-changing feature for Rchain. That's something that clearly separates it from traditional blockchains. Having that ability to actually look into the supply chain of digital assets and maneuver them the way you want, I think that's going to be hugely beneficial, not just to the healthcare ecosystem, but to things like stage performances, catering businesses, traditional investment banking. All of those could benefit greatly from having some sort of RCAT platform where they could actually see where their supply chain is moving around to. But I want to take a step back and dive deeper into something you mentioned, Steve. And it was this idea of three-dimensional audio. Because this is one of the first videos I watched of Greg's, and was really one of the drawing features that got me into Rchain and into the community, was this notion that you'd be able to listen to music on a normal headset, and you would get this new emergent type of sound that would transform your audio cortex and actually be able to hear sounds from a three-dimensional perspective. Now, I don't know much about this. I'm still relatively new to speaking about this, but it seems extremely promising if it could actually be pulled off. How likely do you think something like this is to actually come about?
Well, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in the audio world, but other than the immersion, there are other types of 3D audio decks out there. So, the question I have is having 3D audio, is that a requirement, or is it a nice to have in order to get music downloads and streaming on the blockchain? What we'll see, that's Rchain or a related third party is pursuing that industry. But I think that's this 3D audio is kind of the next step for audio experiences. You've got your headset, and being able to listen to your music in this rich 3D environment. It's one of the things where you gotta hear it to believe it.
It's exciting.
It's like, wow. It truly is. It is really exciting. So it just takes listening to music to the next level. Truly. So that's those types of innovations are really exciting.
All right, and
I think. Oh, sorry, just one more thing. I think also when Rchain went the RSong route, there were several other projects at the time that were claiming to solve the basic monetization model of the music industry. I think there were probably at least 6 or 7, and Rchain at that time needed a unique value proposition on top of that to make noise in the market. With the market expectation at the time being that one of those 6 or 7 were likely to substantially improve upon the SoundCloud or YouTube or Spotify music monetization model. None of them did. So, and leaving immersion aside, Rchain actually has a greater chance of moving the needle 20 or 30% in terms of how music is monetized, and having a lot of transactions per second and a lot of money flow through their network for solving the kinds of basic problems that people were saying were going to be solved in 2017 that never were. Because we're still starting from the same point we were in 2014 in the music industry. Nothing has changed for the last 6 years. And I think immersion's nice to have, but looking at DAPI what Raphael's doing with some very much more simple technology, we can really make a dent in this market before immersion even is mentioned. There's just so much opportunity because no one's done anything.
And when Patrick talks about music monetization, or a new way of monetizing music and distribution of those funds, I think that kind of speaks to the core of the value proposition that our song has, or what it brings. So you take Spotify, where you have musicians and their song musical content is on Spotify, and people are streaming the music. But as I understand it, the musician, especially if you're independent, or if you're not a popular musician, the income stream, the royalties that come to you are pretty sparse. There's whether it's Spotify that's keeping a bulk of the revenue, or other intermediaries. I'm not quite certain, but what our song and some of these other blockchain type of music streaming systems, the value, the promise that they bring is to this disintermediation. The idea that if I'm an artist and the two of you are musicians that play on the song, when I upload my song to our song to a blockchain platform, and then so it's there for people to download, and when they download, they spend that $1 or $2 or however much it is to download that song. The bulk of that payment for that song is going to go to the artists. So a portion will go to me as the song creator or writer, and then the two of you as musicians. So, and it's determined in a smart contract of how that $1 or $2 is divided among the three of us. So that's all been pre-decided. So it's the promises with blockchain and blockchain streaming is this disintermediation, knocking out the middleman, so to speak, so that more revenue will go to the artists themselves. And not only that, it's all reportable, it's all trackable. You can see the money coming in and where it's going. And as it is right now, it's with Spotify and some of the others, there's no transparency there. It's all very vague and nebulous, and that works to their advantage. So if there's a world where there is transparency, such as the blockchain world, hey, that's another one of these, game-changing features. Is now artists and musicians, they can follow the money, and they know if in fact they're being cheated or getting the short end of the stick. So that was the original promise of what our song presented. So, and the thought was, well, hey, as good as that may be, artists, being that they're not necessarily financially savvy or business people, they're in it for the world good that music can bring. Maybe they need this additional feature, such as 3D sound. So it was those two together, which was going to be the product offering of our song. So without the 3D audio and just the disintermediation of our song, is that enough? Is that sufficient to get this mass migration of people off of the Spotifys and the other music streaming platforms of the world to platforms, blockchain music platforms such as our song? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe there still needs to be this rich 3D sound experience. But we're in the early days right now, and it's all kind of being worked out, and that's what makes it all exciting. Is in a sense it's unknown, but we'll see how it all comes out. Go ahead.
We did get our cat out of it, so
we did get our cat. So exactly, that was a big benefit.
Yeah. Well, all right. Artists, musicians, gamers, the future's looking bright. I think that about wraps it up for us. We hit the 50-minute mark. I think, are you guys happy with that? Or unless you have anything else you want to add, something you're passionate about?
No, I thought it was great. Yeah, really, really great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, great job, everyone.
All right, good work, guys. If I do end up uploading this, I'll make sure to send you guys a link.
Okay, very good. All right, well, thanks for the invite, Frank. We appreciate it, getting a chance for us to tell our stories.
Yeah, and then hopefully we could do this sometime soon, or hopefully I'm finishing up the semester. I got finals this week. So after that, I could probably join back at some Rchain back on the community calendar.
Yeah, this is a good format. Patrick, he has an expertise in certain areas, which he can speak to. He has and what you might do is the two of you get together and talk about some of the Patrick's experience in the oil industry, and how he has some projects with flare gas in mining, and with manufacturing and so forth. And I can come in as a third voice to speak to how Rchain and the next generation of blockchain can help make these innovations and these dApps and applications a reality from a Rchain standpoint. So it's a neat dynamic. Everyone kind of. Frank, you're the moderator and narrator of the podcast. Patrick is a subject matter expert in his fields of expertise, and I just provide the color. I'm the color commentator.
Yeah, the Picasso.
Yeah, I'm gonna, just like in the wrestling world, I should get sunglasses and and a hat and something to throw around my neck to add the color to the experience for the listener.
Yeah, all right. We spoke about some difficult subjects today, and we're not. And I quite like to make this a regular thing, because the quality is going to be very variable. It's new territory. It's not like it's an anchored-in format with a defined way of discussing it, like Linus Tech Tips. Where sometimes the answer to the question is going to be too broad, sometimes too narrow. We're going to miss the audience. We're going to miss each other sometimes. And to do it consistently, and I think getting this practice in of telling our story consistently and asking the right questions and giving the right answers in different ways is going to help us all immensely in terms of this kind of marketing comms mission that we need to be on too. So the more we can do this kind of thing, the better we'll be. It's like training.
Yeah, I felt I came in a little unstable, but you guys almost had like a clarity of thought and a clear, stable ability, and that kind of set me straight throughout the podcast.
Oh, I felt like a clown the whole way through.
No, you did great. You were awesome, Patrick.
Oh, thanks.
Great. All right. Well, yeah. So, Frank, feel free to reach out to Patrick and I. When you just with this podcast, I'm sure you got a lot of work you got to do as far as reviewing and editing and so forth, and then start thinking about the next podcast that you want to do. So yeah, reach out to us, and if you want to have that conversation with Patrick, in the meantime, to kind of get Patrick has a wealth of expertise and experiences in various areas. So he's rich in content, and as the moderator, just tapping in that, calling his past experiences, you go, wow, he's there's little gems all over the place. So it's just a matter of identifying what gem you want to pick up next.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually have I have one set up for next week with one of the founders of Zcash, Andrew Miller.
Oh, cool.
He's actually a professor at my school, so I reached out to him, and he said he'd be happy to do it.
Oh, good for you.
Amazing.
Yeah, so if you guys want to learn more about zero-knowledge proofs, maybe how that could apply to Rchain, you should definitely watch it.
Yeah, or if we miss it, be sure to send us the link. I'm sure we both be interested in listening to that podcast.
All right, for sure. Well, thanks again, guys. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Great job, Frank. Thank you so much, bud.
All right.
All right, guys. Have a great day, everyone.